right, everybody, buckle up. We're diving headfirst into the world of Tesla safety today.
Always an exciting topic.
You guys sent over Tesla's latest safety report, and wow, it's dense. We're talking accident rates, autopilot, even vehicle fires, the whole shebang. Lucky for us, we've got expert speaker writing shotgun to break it all down. They've got a real knack for making sense of these data dumps.
Happy to be here. Yeah, Tesla's approach to safety is definitely unique. It'll be interesting to dig in.
Definitely unique. So the report kicks off with Tesla's safety philosophy. Basically, they're all about combining traditional safety features with all the new active safety tech and driver assistance systems.
It's ambitious. They're not just trying to keep up. They want to set the bar for everyone else.
Exactly. And they spend a lot of time talking about their battery design, too. They're really emphasizing that it's a safety feature in itself, not just about performance. That low center of gravity, for example, and how the design allows for those big crumple zones.
It's smart. They're using the battery pack itself to reinforce the car's structure. That's not something you can easily do with the traditional gas tank.
Right. And they even say the battery pack is designed to isolate fires and direct heat away from passengers if the worst happens.
Which is a big deal. With all the talk about EV fires these days, it seems like they're trying to get out in front of those concerns.
For sure. But here's where it gets really interesting. Their focus on real-world data. We're talking billions of miles driven with and without autopilot engaged. That's a ton of data.
And that's really what sets Tesla apart. They're collecting this massive data set from their entire global fleet. Every mile driven, every lane change. It's all data they can use to analyze real-world situations.
And then they use that to improve their safety features, right?
Exactly. It's like a constant feedback loop. The cars are learning, and they share those lessons with the whole fleet through those over-the-air software updates.
So your car could get safer overnight without you even knowing it. Pretty cool.
It's the future of car maintenance.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Tesla makes a big deal about their miles driven per accident, and they really dig into those numbers. They claim there's a huge difference between driving with autopilot on versus off. Like in Q3 of this year, they're reporting one crash for every 7.08 million miles driven with autopilot. But driving without it, one crash every 1.29 million miles.
It's a big difference. And it's consistent with data they've released in the past. But it's important to remember that correlation isn't causation. Just because there are fewer crashes with autopilot doesn't mean autopilot deserves all the credit.
Right, it's a complex system. So how does Tesla's data compare to the national average?
Well, NHTSA and FHWA data from 2022 shows the national average was one crash for every 670,000 miles driven.
So Tesla's saying their cars with autopilot are driving more than 10 times further before a crash, if we're looking at their data.
That's what it looks like. But it's
Yeah.
important to ask how they define an autopilot crash. What are they including and excluding? That'll be important later on.
We'll definitely dig into that. Okay, time to address the elephant in the room, vehicle fires. To be fair to Tesla, they admit there have been fires involving their cars, but they point out that they track all fires, even those that didn't start in the car itself.
And that's an important distinction. They're including things like structure fires, wildfires, even arson.
Right, so it's not just fires that started because of a problem with the Tesla itself.
Exactly. It's a much broader category.
So what's the verdict, according to Tesla?
They say that from 2012 to 2022, there was about one Tesla vehicle fire for every 130 million miles traveled.
Okay. And for comparison, what's the national average look like for all vehicle fires?
Well, NFPA and the U.S. DOT say it's one fire for every 18 million miles driven.
So at first glance, it seems like Tesla's doing a lot better than average. But again, we have to remember they're including those external factors. It makes comparisons tricky.
It's not a perfect apples-to-apples comparison.
Not at all. So it's hard to say anything definitive about Tesla's safety record just based on this fire data. We need more context. Speaking of context, let's talk more about how Tesla actually collects data on autopilot use and crashes.
So they're tracking how many miles are driven with autopilot active versus manual driving. And if there's a crash, they get an alert that might tell them if autopilot was engaged at the time.
Sounds straightforward so far.
But here's where it gets a little more complex. They count a crash as an autopilot crash, even if autopilot was disengaged less than 5 seconds before impact.
Really? Even if the driver had taken over?
That's right. And there's another detail. They're also including any crash where the airbags went off in their autopilot crash statistics, regardless of what caused the crash or who was at fault.
Hold on. So if a Tesla gets rear-ended while autopilot is on, but it's clearly not the Tesla driver's fault, that's still an autopilot crash.
According to their definition, yes.
Okay, I have to ask, what do you make of that? Defining an autopilot crash that way, doesn't it seem
Yeah.
generous?
Well, it's a choice, for sure. I mean, you could say they're just being thorough, right? Trying to capture every single case where autopilot might have played a role, even if it wasn't technically driving at the exact moment of impact.
So they're erring on the side of caution, maybe, when it comes to the data, at least.
Possibly. But then again, by including all those near misses, those situations where autopilot was disengaged just seconds before,
Yeah.
well, it could make those autopilot crash numbers higher than they'd be otherwise.
Right, it makes it tough to figure out if autopilot was actually part of the problem in those crashes or just along for the ride.
Exactly. It's really tricky. It makes you think about how we even define an autopilot crash and how that affects how we see the whole system, safety-wise.
It's all about context and being transparent about how you get that context. Speaking of which, we've talked a lot about Tesla's data, but how does autopilot actually compare to those other driver assistance systems out there? Any way to compare apples to apples?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Unfortunately, it's not that easy. Direct comparisons are tough because everyone's collecting and analyzing data differently. There's no set standard.
So it's like the Wild West of data out there. No rules, no sheriff.
Pretty much. There are groups working on standardized tests, but we're not there yet. So for now, we have to be super careful about comparing apples and oranges, or I guess Teslas too, like every other car with fancy driving tech.
So then how do we make sense of all this? If we can't just compare numbers, what do we do?
We have to look at everything. The manufacturer data is important, but we also need those independent organizations like the IIHS, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, and Consumer Reports. They do their own testing.
So that independent perspective is crucial, that third-party view.
Exactly. And it's not just about the numbers. Think about it. These systems all work differently. Some are for highways, some for cities. Even the drivers themselves, their demographics, their driving styles, it all matters.
Wow, it's way more complicated than just saying system X is safer than system Y. Like comparing a cheetah to a mountain goat, they're both incredible, but in different ways, right?
Love that analogy. And that's really it. We need to be smarter about how we think about safety, especially now with all these driver assistance systems becoming more common.
It's about the bigger picture. Okay, let's circle back to something you mentioned earlier about Tesla, including all those external fires in their data. Why do you think they're doing that? It seems counterintuitive, right? Like, if they're trying to say their cars are safe.
It is an interesting strategy. Maybe by including every fire, no matter the cause, they're going for transparency, even if it makes the numbers look worse at first.
Like they're saying, here's everything, even the bad stuff.
Exactly. And it could also be a way to change how we talk about EV fires in general. By grouping them all together, maybe they're trying to downplay this idea that EV fires are more common or more dangerous than gas car fires.
Like they're saying, fires happen, it's not an EV thing. But doesn't that strategy have risks too? What if their batteries are really safe and they're actually underselling themselves by lumping in those external fires?
That's the tough part. It's a balancing act. You want to be transparent, give the full context, but you also don't want to muddy the waters if you have a good safety story to tell. It depends on what's more important. Putting your best foot forward or showing the whole picture, warts and all.
Tough call. It really shows how important it is for us as consumers to be careful with this kind of data. Can't just take it at face value.
Definitely not. We've got to dig deeper, figure out how they got those numbers, and be aware of any bias, intentional or not, that might be shaping the narrative. It's the only way to really understand Tesla's safety record, or any car makers, for that matter.
You've given me a lot to think about. Every time I think I've got a handle on this stuff, there's another layer. Makes you wonder where this is all going, long term.
It does. And it brings us back to that big question, right? How safe are Tesla vehicles?
The million-dollar question.
Wow. It really is. But looking at everything, Tesla's data, independent reports, it seems like they're doing pretty well. This whole approach, all the tech, the data, the constant updates, it's innovative. And it might actually be making things safer.
You say might, and I know there are always caveats, right? Especially with something as complex as car safety.
You're absolutely right. There are always buts. For one thing, car safety is constantly evolving. What's cutting edge today is old news tomorrow. Tesla needs to stay ahead of the curve, keep innovating. The roads are changing. The tech is changing. It's a moving target.
It's like a high-speed chess game, and the board keeps getting bigger.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the human element. The best safety features in the world can't make up for a bad driver. Driver education, knowing how to use this tech responsibly, understanding what it can and can't do, those are all crucial.
It's finding that balance, not relying too much on the tech, but also embracing how it can make driving safer for everyone.
Exactly. And that's what makes Tesla so interesting. They're pushing boundaries, making us rethink how we approach safety in this new world of, well, increasingly intelligent cars.
Yeah, it really makes you think, where does it all go from here?
Right. And it all comes back to that question we started with. How safe are Teslas, really?
The million-dollar question. No easy answers.
Definitely not. But from what we've seen, their data, the independent stuff, it seems like they're doing pretty well. This whole approach, the tech, the data collection, always updating, it's innovative, and it might actually be making a difference, safety-wise.
You keep saying might, and I know there are always caveats, especially when we're talking about something as complex as car safety.
Of course. Of course. There are always buts. Like, car safety is never a finished product, right?
Right.
What's cutting edge today is old news tomorrow. So Tesla has to stay ahead of the game, keep innovating. The roads are changing, the technology's changing. It's all moving so fast.
A high-speed chess game where the board keeps getting bigger.
Exactly. And then you've got the human element on top of all that.
Yeah.
Because even the best tech in the world can't fix a bad driver. Things like driver education, using this tech responsibly, knowing what it can and can't do, those are all critical.
It's about finding that balance, not putting too much faith in technology, but also, being open to how it can make things safer for everyone.
Absolutely. And that's what I find so fascinating about Tesla. They're really pushing the envelope, forcing everyone to rethink what safety looks like in this new world of, well, basically robot cars.
No, it's been a wild ride, this report. I've learned a lot, that's for sure.
Glad to hear it. It's a fascinating topic. I always enjoy digging into this stuff with you.
So for anyone listening along, what are your big takeaways from today?
I think the biggest takeaway is that this is just the beginning. This whole data-driven approach, this constant evolution, it's not just Tesla. It's the future of the whole car industry. And like any future, there are unknowns, there are risks, but there's also a ton of potential.
A future that's worth paying attention to. And if this got you thinking, if you're curious about this stuff, keep digging. Read those independent reports. Compare Tesla to other car companies. Figure out what you think. Because this conversation, it's far from over. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, drive safe and stay curious, everyone.